Greetings from Slim bin Muhammad Rafi, and here is my take on my YouTube channel Zamir Universal. My topic today is that how United States of America never stops fighting proxy war. Everyone today, when we talk about war in Ukraine and feel sympathy for Ukrainians, I think we are absolutely right to do so. Reason is not what the United States of America is portraying, that the invader here or the usurper here or the opportunist here is Russia or Putin, the president of Russia. It's just the opposite. It's the long-term objectives and long-term goals of United States of America. For the last 2 centuries, it has never ever stopped. The targets and the pivotal point on the global map keeps changing, and I play a audio with an in-depth analysis of their involvement in South America and the hub of CIA activity, which works towards their long-term objectives and policy, is how they are involved in recruiting mercenaries, recruiting the politicians and the media, bribing them, torturing them, kidnapping them, and using them. And then how there are certain names which are well known in the world that the United States of America has, and we can call them as Dirty Harrys. Dirty Harry is a word which I think originated in Pakistan about certain elements which are invisible but are really, they exist, and they exist in the form of deep state actors without naming them who they are, from which institution they are. And the famous interview of Hillary Clinton saying that we never ever work through the elected members, or which is the elected prime minister or anybody else who is there as a prime minister or president of that country. We work through these deep state actors, which are normally the armed forces with their intelligence agencies, irrespective of the country, and unfortunately she named as number 1 Pakistan. So the word Dirty Harry originated from there by local people, by the local politicians, and not known internationally what the Dirty Harry is. But the term can be shifted from there across the continent to 9,000 miles away, and I think will be befitting on the United States of America on saying their deep state actors exist in Pentagon, and they have their intelligence agencies like CIA, and they have their covert operations, and how they destabilize it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me talk for a moment about Poland in relation to the U.S. proxy war against Europe, popularly known as the Ukraine war. As I have stated since the outbreak of the war, in my opinion, the Ukraine war is a U.S. proxy war not against Russia, but against Europe. It is the launch pad for a continent-wide destabilization project that will create conflict zone conditions across Europe. It will divide the EU against itself. It will deindustrialize the continent and turn it into another laboratory for the imposition of severe neoliberal austerity policies that will wipe out all except the largest private sector players and basically re-feudalize Europe. Now, Poland appears to have been selected by the United States to act as their hub of operations for implementing this program. But before I get into that, let's go back to one of the earliest examples of this type of project, the dirty wars in Central and South America in the 1980s. When I was growing up, I was always interested in the news and current affairs and world events and so on. And the evening news every night was dominated by stories of savagery in places like Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Argentina. Civil wars, death squads, abductions, torture, and all forms of brutality proliferated the entire region. Now, all of this was orchestrated out of the American embassy in Honduras under the management of then U.S. Ambassador John Negroponte, whom locals referred to as Mr. Death Squad. Honduras had the largest U.S. embassy, it had the biggest CIA station, and the country became the staging ground for a regional destabilization project that continued throughout the 1980s. When John Negroponte was appointed the U.S. ambassador to Iraq shortly after the invasion and occupation, I fully anticipated that he would pursue the same sort of destabilization project throughout the Middle East. Now, Negroponte had a protege named Robert Stephen Ford, who was appointed the U.S. ambassador to Syria at that time, and he immediately began trying to foment rebellion and opposition and resistance and recruiting militia groups until he was eventually kicked out of the country. Now, I think we're all aware of what happened a few short years later in the Arab world with the Arab Spring, and we're all aware also, I think, of the role played by CIA-backed organizations in that disruptive movement. And I think we're also all aware of the role played by the CIA in backing armed groups in the civil war in Syria. In fact, during the Arab Spring, the United States tried to appoint Robert Stephen Ford after he'd been kicked out of Syria. They tried to appoint him as the U.S. ambassador to Egypt, but fortunately, his reputation and the reputation of John Negroponte preceded them, and popular opposition to that appointment forced the U.S. to scrap the idea. So the point here is that there is a pattern, and once you are familiar with the pattern, you can recognize it, and you can sort of abstractly predict the way it's going to play out, if not specifically. Well, in the current scenario, in my opinion, Poland is Honduras. Near the beginning of the war in Ukraine, I noticed the role being played by Poland as a destination for refugees and as a source for mercenaries to go and fight in Ukraine. So I decided to check, who is the U.S. ambassador to Poland right now? Well, the U.S. ambassador to Poland right now is not Robert Stephen Ford, and it's not John Negroponte or any of their known proteges. The current U.S. ambassador to Poland is the son of one of the most notorious policy advisors in recent U.S. history, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And I'm not going to make any effort to say his name correctly. Brzezinski, who was Polish, was the architect of U.S. support for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. And he was a staunch and paranoid anti-Russian zealot. Now, Brzezinski felt that the disintegration of the EU was inevitable, and that only the perception of a threat being posed by Russia could possibly induce the Europeans to act in unison.
I think a united Europe came into being out of fear. I think that entity is now on the way to a disintegration because the fear is gone. There is a certain inevitability to that. Now, if Putin starts another wave of Cold War unilateral actions, they'll probably all come back again.
He also believed that there were several countries that had been admitted into the EU that never should have been admitted, namely the Eastern Bloc countries and the Baltic states. Now, I think it's safe to assume that Mark Brzezinski, the current U.S. ambassador to Poland, probably shares his father's views, and he is now in charge of coordinating the destabilization program for Europe that will see the continent split right down the middle, with America's focus of support moving from the Atlantic European states and the Central European states to the Eastern European states, with Poland as its primary client. Ironically, the U.S. is using Brzezinski's theory that the Europeans need a Russian threat in order to act in unison. They're using that theory to coerce the European nations to be unified in the adoption of policies that will ultimately lead to the disintegration of Europe. Now, no doubt, the U.S. is dangling promises in front of Poland, telling them that they will re-emerge as a major power after 4 centuries of irrelevance, telling them that Germany is weakening both naturally and by design, and that Poland can become not only the manufacturing hub and heart of Europe, but also the strongest military power. They're even hinting that Poland can become a superstate, incorporating both Lithuania and Western Ukraine into their territory. And just FYI, the suspected St. Petersburg bomber was born in Western Ukraine. So based on all of these promises, in my opinion, Poland is willingly doing America's dirty work, which, after all, they've actually been doing for quite some time. As a result of embracing their role as a destabilizing client state of the U.S., Poland will likely become a police state, and this is already happening, with American soldiers running amok in the country and Polish police telling their citizens that they have no right to arrest them, as you see here.
You could post this on any social media. You think Russia's going to protect you?
And the same is likely to happen in the other Eastern Bloc and Baltic states where America is shifting its focus. They will be tightly controlled by American influence, and they will be encouraged to distance themselves from the EU and to even form their own economic and security bloc, which again, we already see happening. Poland will potentially become militarily engaged in the war in Ukraine against Russia, as well as potentially in Belarus. And unquestionably, covert disruption activities in both Moldova and in Georgia and elsewhere will be originating from the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw. So this is just to give you a sort of geopolitical framework for what's happening in Europe and Poland's role in that, in what is a repeating pattern by the U.S. And here I would like to say that I think our understanding of the multiple ayat in the Quran that warn the Muslims against taking the kuffar as our awliya, our understanding should include the possibility that this isn't only because they are unreliable awliya for the Muslims, but also because they are unreliable awliya even for each other. And this is because they tend to operate according to short-sighted self-interest. Their loyalty is a commodity sold for benefit, and they will willingly turn on anyone if they think it will profit them. I don't think anything could demonstrate this more clearly than what's going on in Europe, and how America has no qualms whatsoever about sabotaging and undermining the safety, the prosperity, and even the lives of Europeans, while at the same time claiming to be their best friends.
Region and the ripples of that destabilizations benefit both the people who want to benefit commercially, economically, and obviously politically, and they keep their hegemony and keep their so-called pseudo super power, which is just like a mafia or Sicilian mafia, that they act as a godfather. So this is the ugliest face of United States of America, as a godfather of the world, not only a region. They only shift from South America, and in the audio you will listen to me behind, that in the background will clearly show you that what havoc they played in South America, and then when they landed in Middle East, that what havoc they played, that the ripples are even being felt today, just like the tremors after a very big earthquake. And this will keep on happening unless someone stronger, someone bigger, someone cleverer, I think, confronts them. And now, for the first time, I think, in a century, we begin to see, and there is a hope that that is already on the horizon. And this is why they do not want to tolerate. They want to cross all the norms. They want that there is the last word, and so they will keep on, I think, doing everything which you will forget about Holocaust or any other tyrant who did it in the last 2 centuries. They did it with the natives, they did it with the immigrants, and they, together with the British, they did it with the Chinese, and they, together with France, they did it with other nations. Some they provided morphine, some they provided heroin, some they provided so that they become addictive and they are useless, they don't work hard, and China is one example. And in Africa there are many examples. So there are in Algeria, so there are in Middle East, and the basic ugly planning and this, which world never realized, is this, newborn immigrant country which claims now to be the superpower of the world. And that challenge has come from a man who has a very, very poor background and who was working for an intelligent Russian agency of KGB, became a mayor or deputy mayor, and from there he rose up to the president of the Russian Republic. Now, nobody would have taken this seriously, and along with him came up China, a joint, a uniter, not divider, not an invader, a helper. And at the moment, the richest, at the moment, the most productive, all manufacturing has shifted from the world, from the Europe, from United States of America, from Canada, from everywhere to there, because there are cheap labor, people work hard, people work day and night, and they have obviously taken over the whole world market. So their GDP is in trillions. When you look at that, then you realize my take on this chronic, ugly, and disastrous problem is, and the actors I will not point my finger on that actor now, by now you know it, that actor is the one who played havoc in South America, who played havoc in the Middle East, and who supported always the ugliest, always the worst, and the tyrant, and the murderer, the butcher, and the inhuman, and one typical example of that is they created right in the heart of the most sacred state, Palestine, the first Qibla of the whole Muslim world, Masjid al-Aqsa, and see how they tie the hands of the worshippers, how they put their guns and on their heads while they are prostrating. You would have never ever seen any cruelty. You see that how the 6-year-old boys, they shoot them in the head, they hang them upside down, they tie them up on the poles and keep hitting on their shins till they die. Now have you anybody, can you compare any Hitler, any Pharaoh, any Namrud with this, particular type of Zionist, the particular type of breed which these people created, that monster in the Middle East, and look at how they are usurping. You would not see even any reptile, you would not see even a crocodile engulfing as they are engulfing their land, their olive groves, their homes, their women. They are shooting them. They are helpless, they are unarmed, and look, one layer of cage followed by another cage, the concrete one followed by steel, and the steel again with barbed wire, and then with the razor sharp things. That is what you call as the illegitimate, the illegal, the deplorable, despicable, disgusting state, what you call state of Israel. If that is the shape of the democracy, God forbid, there should never be a democracy anywhere in the world. You know that this is a group of tyrants. The people who are real worshippers, the world who are real Jews, who are real followers of Prophet Moses, they abandoned Torah. They do not follow Torah. They don't even know what was in the Torah anymore. Talmud is not Torah. It's not a replacement of Torah, what the Prophet Moses brought. There's a divine message to them. It is their sermons, the sermons of their rabbis, one differing from the other. And the one who are Orthodox Jews, they hate them. They throw them out. They get their horses, walk over them. They have no voice. They give them just a symbolic position in the parliament, but they have absolutes, as they do with a couple of Muslims who live there. They do not even consider them human. There are two countries in the world they think that the Muslims are not human. One is that another butcher of Gujarat is Narendra Modi, who for God's sake will never, ever, ever would have been selected in 2014. He played the dirtiest trick, he lied, and he created self, like Pulwama, he created self-destructive attacks just like 9/11, and which was again a joint venture of the Mossad and RAW and CIA. And that's what they wanted to do. It was a much bigger picture on the canvas, the much bigger game they wanted for at least a century of their hegemony and dominance. And that is their illegitimate child. They want him in their lap, and that was the Israel. Now, for the first time, they both have been threatened. Israel knows that its end is nearing. Now, neither Russia nor China is going to accept that. And now India is playing a dirtiest game. Now these 7 countries have come up with their own currency. Now with their own currency, which won't be yuan, which won't be dollar, that will be a currency introduced which will finish the petrodollar forever. So there will be no demand for that green, piece of paper which they can print in millions, and they get away with this. So there will be another currency, and so backstabber is India, South Africa, China, and Russia. And when they come up, that will be a slow death and strangulation of this superpower. And there's nothing now this evil can do anymore. It's a matter of, I think, maybe another few years, even months or weeks, when they will meet their fate. Even they got now as Poland as their headquarters and to destroy Europe. Because unless they destroy Europe, Europe is a big power now. European Union is a power, and Germany especially, and economy and GDP is there now as a big power. So they have to finish that. They have to dominate Europe, and there is no way they can do it. The only way they can do is to create a parallel. So after Warsaw Pact, now they want some place to occupy there as their focal point, and from there they would like to destroy Russia, or especially Putin. And this proxy war in Ukraine is for that long-term objective. And God forbid, if this objective is fulfilled, then wait for another few centuries, the hegemony of the same evil around us, same petrodollar around us. But I don't think so. I think my take is that the way Saudi Arabia has now stopped pleasing United States and got rid of petrodollar, and they are now trading in yuan and trading in even local currencies and selling their oil. I think their economic power is finished, and with economic power finishes the deep state actors, and I think it finishes completely. Then see the collapse of there, and so Europe should wake up if Europe wants to survive. And I think China, as they did with Iran and Saudi Arabia, the next it should be between the Palestinian and the Israelis. And if they can do that, then I think the hegemony and the superpower of United States of America is dead forever. With these points of my take, and this is especially my own take, and I'm not accusing and I'm not supporting anybody else. This is how I analyze the situation. And I hope that the people who are sane, people who are intellectuals in the United States of America, they will take care of those people, because the whole of America is full of very good people. There are few people, the opportunists, they run their lives, just like in any other country. So I think they wake up. It has a country of opportunity, and there are a lot of good people in the United States of America. So it's nothing against American people. It is against their deep state actors. And that is what the point is. That's what created the problem. And I hope, God, they wake up now. With these words, I take leave.
ज़मीर यूनिवर्सल टेलीविजन को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें। उसके बाद बेल बटन पे क्लिक करें और अपने कमेंट्स के सेक्शन में अपने कीमती जो ख्यालात का इजहार ज़रूर